If you've been trying to become someone new from within, you're in the right place. Welcome to Your Colorful Path. This podcast brings you real proof of what's possible when you choose meditation, inner work, and self-belief. Because when you live only from the human lens, life can feel like an obstacle course. But when you align with the divine in you, life becomes a colorful path, guided, adventurous, and deeply aligned. I'm Charu, your host. Let's begin. Today we have a really special guest. Her story had shook me when I heard her testimonial on Dr. Joe Dispenza's official YouTube page. At 35, a rare bone cancer at the base of her spine took her from surfing in San Diego to being bedridden, in extreme pain, unable to walk, and severely limited. She was told surgery was her only real option, and that even then, the outlook was bleak. Then, a book that she never ordered showed up at her doorstep, Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. She started meditating every day in agonizing pain and with gripping fear and anxiety about what will happen next. But slowly, everything began to shift. First, her fear, then her body. If you've ever needed proof that small inner shifts can become a whole new life, stay with us. Today, we have with us Crystal Carothers, an amazing, life-changing story that you're about to hear.
And then July of that year, I received from my oncologist, he classified me as no evidence of disease. I never had to have the surgery, and it's been 7 years. And at some point I decided, I think it was when the surgeon told me, like, I don't expect you to live in, more than 5 years. I just started I just decided I'm going to be in the business of proving doctors wrong. So I actually made this little list that I keep in my phone, and it's kind of all the things that doctors told me I would never be able to do again, but I'm doing those things, So of course, it's been 7 years. I'm still fine. Everything is great.
Crystal, welcome to Your Colorful Path with Charu.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I love that introduction.
Yeah, you deserve every bit of it. I remember hearing your story, and I know that a lot of people think that, this is just another healing journey. But once you get deeper into the milestones of somebody's journey and you really realize how much they have overcome to be on the stage and to say that we are cancer-free, that for 7 years now you are in pristine health, and coming from something that was such a super rare cancer that could be severely debilitating, being somebody who's so active, is a surfer, enjoys life, eats healthy, takes care of herself, and is super young, this would have been quite a blow. So I kind of want to take it from that moment when you first found out, and take us to that moment, how it happened, what happened, and then we'll get deeper into how you dealt with it.
Right. So I was having a lot of pain, and so I got an MRI because nothing was showing up on the x-rays. And then, it was discovered that I had this mass. And of course, then I was very scared, but I just still didn't think that it could be cancer because they still have to do a biopsy. And it just didn't make sense that I would have cancer because I just thought, I'm so healthy and it is what it is, but I'm sure it'll just be a surgery and everything will be fine. But then it turned out that it was cancer. And I remember receiving the news and I just was shocked and I couldn't believe it. My mom was with me and I just, started crying because I didn't know what that meant for my future. And then the surgeon actually kind of stopped for a second. He said, you're going to have the surgery, and this is the only treatment for this cancer is basically surgery. It does not respond to chemotherapy or radiation. And so at first I was like, okay, great. I don't want to have chemotherapy. So let's just get on with this surgery. But then he started to detail what the surgery would involve, which would be amputation of my sacrum. And that would also mean that I would lose bowel and bladder control. And I think that part just like rocked my world, because I just could not imagine my life at 35 and not being able to have, like, I just didn't know. I just didn't know what that would be like. And I'm just this active person who's like surfing all the time. And it just shook my world. And that's when I think the devastation really kicked in for me. Like, okay, it's not just going to be a surgery. It's like, my life is never going to be the same. And so within that one appointment, though, towards the end, it was when he said something that just triggered something in me that, like, I'm not having this surgery. And it was when he said, even with surgery, there's a 50% chance that the tumor will come back. And I just like could not accept that. I was just like, there's no way I'm going to have this surgery and it be that devastating to my body. And I'm going to have all this hardware and I'm never going to be able to surf again. And then to also just hear that like my chances are 50-50 of like having a cure. I was like, that's no. There has to be another way. That's what I honestly felt like that was a powerful experience, because it's almost like I felt like an energy kind of like going up my spine of like determination. And I sort of felt like everything in my life that had happened up to then was like to prepare me for this moment. Like it almost felt like it was supposed to happen and that I was supposed to go through this because I've been prepared for this. So I know maybe that sounds weird, but that's just how I felt in the moment, that I was not going to have the surgery and that I was going to find another way, and that all the books I've read and all the documentaries I've seen have sort of prepared me for this, because I feel like I've always been really intrigued by books and documentaries that like show people healing on their own terms. And I've always been so inspired by that.
Yeah, so that's fascinating, because when the doctors tell you that medically your options are super limited and the option they do give you is one of a very different life that basically limits your identity, limits your independence. And by telling you that you're going to be on all these different, probably even medications your whole life, and you're not going to be able to move and not walk with a limp, because I heard your story and they were limiting every single aspect of your life, from sexual health to mental health to physical health. Everything is going to be limited by this one surgery. That seems like such a dead end. And I understand now in hindsight, you can look back and you have an entirely different perspective. But when you first got the diagnosis, or the first months, days, what was that like? Or were you really able to differentiate between the part of you that was feeling like, oh my God, this is such a dead end, versus the part of you that was saying, welcome to the initiation, this is what you will overcome? Or was it not so clear?
I would go back and forth. So, I mean, the first thing I did when I got home was I was just Googling. So a lot of those things, like the limp and like sexual dysfunction and all that stuff, that was not something they told me initially, but that was something that I read online, about people who have this surgery. And like, once you have that part of your spine removed, you lose those functions. So that was kind of how I found out about that. And so reading all of that just kind of made me even more determined to not want to have the surgery. And I was just like in this mode of like searching. What is it? Like, I'm going to find a different way. But at the same time, I was still thinking at times, okay, maybe this is my only choice. And maybe this is what I have to do, because I wasn't finding anything. I wasn't finding any alternative treatments online. I wasn't finding anybody online who had not had the surgery. That was deflating. And so I wasn't finding the answers online. So that kind of is what put me in that state of like, I don't know what I'm going to do, because what the doctor told me is correct. Like, there doesn't seem, I was going through like research papers and all these things and just calling people. I was getting second and third and fourth opinions from different doctors, but I was just running into the same information. So I did have moments where I was just like, I don't know if I am going to be able to find a different way, but I still had that determination.
And we're going to get into what happens after, but I want to put a pin on this, because I think this is a thread that runs through your entire story, that in the face of all this external evidence that, Crystal, you're never going to be able to do this again. And Crystal, you're never going to be able to do that again. And limitation and doubt and anxiety, not just from your own self, but also from people who really care about you, family, friends. There was something that was slowly knocking through and coming through for you. And I heard it in the words when you said, there was a part of me that was really determined that this is not for me. I'm not going to go for that surgery. And I think that's big. I want you to speak a little bit about that, because I think that's, according to me, that's your inner guidance system working and helping you navigate this chaos. Do you feel like there was something that was happening that was beyond the mind that just wanted to control the situation?
That's a good question. I remember Dr. Joe Dispenza talking about this once, or maybe I read it in one of his books, where he said one of the traits of people who heal themselves is just this unwillingness to accept what the doctor says. If the doctor says you only have 2 to 3 years to live, they just say, no, that's not going to be my reality. And so I think I had that. I don't know if it's innate in me. It probably is, because I feel like I've always had this sort of, questioning of authority a little bit and wanting to verify things on my own. But that also could have been just part of the guidance as well. So I did not accept what the doctors told me. And that was like pretty quickly, I was like, I'm going to look for an alternative, a different way to do this.
Beautiful. And so you tried many different things, like you said in your testimonial, that you tried many different modalities. You also went and saw somebody in Brazil for a healing, and you did naturopathy and many other modalities. And eventually they did not produce the results that you were looking for. So take us through that time period of the trial and error and your mystical guidance that I so love that you received on the beach.
Yeah, so I went to Brazil because, there's the spiritual healer and I'm just looking for this miracle. And I actually had a surgery date that was like 1 month out, and they told me it's a slow growing tumor. So I felt like, okay, I had time to explore my options. My surgery was a month from now. It was on the calendar, but I was just going to do everything in my power in the meantime to not have that surgery. So going to Brazil was one thing. But the crazy thing about Brazil, I was there for 2.5 weeks, came back, had to get an MRI to prepare for surgery. And it showed that the tumor had grown significantly. I think it tripled in size. I remember it going from the size of an egg when it was first found, and then going from that to a grapefruit in the span of 6 weeks.
Talk about slow. That
was not a slow growing tumor. So then it led to this whole thing of maybe she's been misdiagnosed. We've never seen a chordoma. Chordoma is the name of the bone cancer I had that's very rare. We've never seen one grow this quickly. So then I got re-biopsied, but it just came back, it was chordoma. So then I had all this extra fear about I have some kind of weird beast that's behaving erratically. And so that was just another layer of fear that I went to Mexico to go to a cancer clinic that specialized in immunotherapy and spent thousands and thousands of dollars. And, that just exemplifies how desperate I was. And that seemed to have slowed the growth of the tumor. But when I got my next MRI, it was still growing. When I came back from Brazil and the surgeon saw that the tumor had tripled in size, he canceled the surgery, basically threw in the surgical towel and said, this surgery is going to be way too complicated now. I'm going to refer you to a specialist at UCLA. So then I get referred out. And so that's going to take another 2 months just to get a consult with this guy. So then I had additional time, and that's when I went to Mexico. And then that's when, after coming back from Mexico, after being there for 3 weeks, I went to a naturopathic doctor, was doing high dose vitamin C, all the things, everything you can think of that you can get from a naturopathic clinic. I was doing it, trying to control my diet. But at that time, I think I initially was doing a pretty good job of eating a very, very super clean, organic, vegan diet, gluten-free and all these things. But then I moved in with my mom because I started to have so much pain during that time that I was not able to care for myself. I was starting to become bedridden at that point. I could only stand up for a few minutes at a time. And so I literally couldn't stand up long enough to make myself meals. I could not sit to drive myself anywhere. So my mom had to drive me, or my sister had to drive me, or somebody had to drive me to like the naturopathic clinic, you know. But in Brazil and in Mexico, like I was still able to stand up on my own and do things for myself at that point. But it's like once I came back from Mexico, it's just like the pain escalated, my fear was escalated, and so I just moved in full time with my parents and was just waiting for that UCLA surgeon to schedule my surgery. So at that point, my pain got so bad that I was begging for the surgery. I was calling UCLA like every day, crying, begging them to schedule my surgery. And it was like hard to do because the surgery that I was going to get involved 4 different surgeons. It was like a general surgeon, a plastic surgeon. And I don't think I mentioned when I went to the plastic surgeon, but that's an interesting story because I have to go to see a plastic surgeon. I don't know why. I don't even understand like half the things about this surgery. But when I get there, he looks at me and he just looks really sad. Like he just had the saddest eyes. And he's like explaining what he's going to do during the surgery is he's going to remove one side of my abdominal muscle. So like the abdominal muscle that goes down my right stomach, or no, my left stomach, he's going to cut that out, roll it, and then flip it around so it becomes like a cushion for my sacrum or like my spine or something. Like I still don't even understand it, but it's called a flap. Like it's what's known as a flap. So they roll it up. They basically remove that whole abdominal muscle. And so it just like becomes a cushion because otherwise you have bone protruding out of the skin. And so for me, it just like, that's just like another layer that like made this surgery like so horrific. Like I'm only going to have half of my abdominal muscle. And then it just felt like you're taking apart my body and like doing all these weird things with it. It just felt so not right to me. But when he was like measuring my waist or something with like a, you know, one of those measuring tapes and just like taking dimensions and stuff like that, he looked up at me and like, I will never forget this moment. And my mom was there and she says the same thing. He just looked like he was about to cry. And he said, I'm so sorry that you have to go through this. Or maybe he said, I'm so sorry we have to do this to you. Like he just looked so sad. Like he did not even want to do that. And like that gave me a lot of fear too. Like I was just like, oh my God, even the surgeon like just feels so bad for me. And so that was just like such a defining moment too. That was like, wow. But going back to the man on the beach, I was thinking about him during this time. But what had happened was before my diagnosis, I was having pain and I was sitting on the beach one day and I was sad because I couldn't surf because I was in too much pain. And I was like reading a spiritual book. And this older gentleman came up to me on the beach and he said, hey, what are you reading? And I looked up and I just started talking to him about the book I was reading. He started telling me about all the spiritual books that he loves to read. And he's a big fan of like Sadhguru, or what's his name?
Yes, Sadhguru.
Inner engineering. And we were talking about that. We were talking about Eckhart Tolle. And so we're just having like this really great conversation. And we were just talking so much that he like sits down next to me. And then he starts telling me his life story. And he gets into the fact that he had stage 4 cancer. I believe it was colon cancer. I don't remember if it was like a year ago or 2 years ago. And that he was put on hospice because there was nothing else that could be done for him. And he came to the beach to just surrender and meditate. And he said he had all these like mystical experiences and he saw like, you know, all about the universe and how it worked and how he just said we're actors and we're just all playing a role. And he just had the most amazing mystical meditations. And then he said he went back to the doctor and they could not find a trace of cancer in his body. So he said the meditations, when I came out here to surrender and just like meditate and open up, and I just like received this healing. And he's like, I'm here and now I'm like working with the homeless. And he's like, I have a whole new role to play in this world, you know?
And this was before your diagnosis.
Yeah. So it was before I was diagnosed. I would say 3 weeks before. And we talked probably for an hour. And I just remember thinking, wow, what an incredible story that he has. You know, I didn't doubt it. It seemed very like sincere. That's what I thought. What an incredible story. And then the last thing he said to me was like, I don't know why I felt so compelled to talk to you, but I'm sure that will be revealed one day. And then he walked away. And so when I was diagnosed, I think after I was like getting over the initial shock of everything, I thought about him and I was just like, is this a weird coincidence or is there something more to it? And I just held it in my mind like that. I don't know.
Yeah. You put a pin on it.
Yeah, I put it in the back of my mind because I just had all this fear, like, what am I going to do? And I think I was thinking like, well, that's great. It worked for him, but I don't think like I could just meditate this tumor, this erratic behaving tumor that just felt to me like it was the unicorn of tumors, you know, because it was supposed to be slow growing and it's already super rare and it already doesn't respond to chemotherapy and radiation. And like, I just felt like I almost had like a totally different disease, honestly. It was in my head and I'd forget about it and then I'd remember it. And the other crazy thing is that this man, his name was Paul, after I was diagnosed and I was still, you know, in my neighborhood, not yet living with my mom. I think I hadn't yet gone to Brazil. I saw him 2 more times. The second time I saw him was like at the farmer's market. And I remember seeing him across the way and I was like, oh, I want to go talk to him and tell him, I think I know why he felt compelled to talk to me and tell him that like now I'm diagnosed, you know, because I was telling him that I was having pain, but I just didn't know the source of it. And so I tried to find him and I was going through all the kiosks and I'm like, where did he go? And I just like never found him. And it's kind of chaotic in the farmer's market. So you could see how that could happen. But then the next time I saw him was maybe a few days later. And I saw him like walking on the beach and I had just ran into a friend that I hadn't seen in like 8 or 9 years. And it was like, oh my God, hi. And like while I was saying hi to her, I saw him walking by, but I didn't want to be rude and like say, oh my God, even though I haven't seen you in 8 years, like I need to go. So that was like another weird experience. And like after I had talked to her, like I couldn't find him. But it was now in retrospect, it was like, okay, that's the universe like reminding me, hey, remember this guy?
Yeah. The breadcrumbs.
Yeah. The universe was giving me breadcrumbs. And I think there were a few times when I was like, okay, well, I want to try this meditation thing, but like it didn't help me that much or didn't seem to, or I just didn't seem to have the like belief that like that would heal me, you know? And at times I was like willing to, and you know, I did meditate here and there and get like some kind of relaxation from it, but I just couldn't get myself on like a consistent schedule with it. I didn't have the belief for it that it was going to do much for me. I was just caught up in all the like, what am I going to do? Surgery or Brazil and doing all these other things.
Got it. So then fast forward to your approaching the surgery, you were hospitalized and waiting for it, if I'm not wrong.
I wasn't hospitalized, no. I was just waiting at home, but I was kind of bedridden at that time, had a hard time moving around. So what happened next was I had met 2 oncologists when I was in Mexico and getting the immunotherapy, and they had recommended an alternative to surgery, and they had given me some studies. It was called proton beam radiation, which normally does not work in this type of cancer. But there have been some experiments with high doses, and extremely high doses of this radiation, which is super targeted. It can shrink the chordoma tumors. It has been shown to shrink them. Okay. And so this treatment is usually only reserved for older people who are in their 70s and 80s and diagnosed because they're not healthy enough to go through with such a morbid and brutal surgery. Like they don't recover from that type of surgery once you're that age. So that's when you get the radiation because supposedly you don't live as long with the radiation as you might with the surgery.
My God, what a dead end. You have to get the surgery, but like both outcomes are terrible.
Yeah. So the radiation is supposed to, you know, in 80% of cases give you 5-year survival, but that's kind of where it starts to drop down dramatically. So that was like another option. And I was looking into that because I thought, well, I think I had read the prognosis or average survival rates with surgery are around 7 years. And the average survival rate with radiation is 5 years. But with radiation, I don't have to have this like brutal surgery. It would still shrink the tumor. Maybe I could still surf for the like remaining 5 years and still have my, you know, bladder and bowel control and like, you know, just have a higher quality of life. So that's how I was looking at it. I was like surgery with a 50% recurrence rate. And also just in general, there's like an average of a 7-year survival rate, or radiation and you get 5 years, but like higher quality of life. So I was like, well, I'd rather just be like surfing. The last 5 years, it's like everything for me was like about surfing and quality of life. So
Of course. But you're picking like the lesser of the two evils.
yeah. And so I decided to do that.
Okay, so we proceed with the proton beam therapy and radiation. And then how did it work out? Did it work out at all? And where did it leave you? Because I know in the testimonial you said that it was really, really difficult and the end result was not that much of what you had expected and it left you in a lot of pain. And
Exactly. So the radiation, I was not expecting to happen. What happened was they told me the side effects are X, Y, and Z. Like maybe you'll have some diarrhea. You'll probably go into menopause. Actually, I think they told me that's guaranteed. They offered, do you want to freeze your eggs? And I was just like, no, I actually never wanted to have kids. So, I just was like, I just want to survive. Like, what am I going to do having kids when I'm like only supposed to live another 7 years,
Yeah.
So I was just like,
Understandable.
those were the side effects they told me about. I did not expect to be in as much pain as I was. Like within the first 2 weeks, it was brutal. I just felt like I was getting tased on the inside with all the nerves. And because the tumor was like wrapped around my sciatic nerves and all those nerves that run down your legs. And so it just felt like I was constantly being like zapped or like tased. Like it was like a burning sensation sometimes. And then it also just felt like I just also could feel the bone pain really intensely because it was like there was inflammation, because once you start hitting the tumor with radiation, and because I was getting such high doses and because it's like wrapped around all those nerves, it was just the most excruciating pain ever. And I just like after 2 weeks quit. I was like, I told my radiologist, I can't do it anymore. Like it's too painful. I'm not coming back. He begged me to keep going. And he's like, we're going to raise your pain medication dose. I was like, I think that's when I got on morphine. So he put me on morphine. And then I kept coming back because that did help a little bit. And then a couple of weeks later, I was like, oh no, this is too much. I can't take it. So I honestly quit like 3 different times. And every time I quit, they would up my medication dose. And I remember at one point I was like on 180 milligrams of morphine. And on top of that, I was on Dilaudid. And I was still in so much pain, like just out of control pain. And like my mom was like walking around with Narcan because she was, not just she, but like the doctor scared her that I could have an overdose because I was on, I think it was like the highest amount of opioids you can be on without being hospitalized. And so they said, like, if you need more pain medication, then you will have to be hospitalized. And so I didn't want to be in a hospital. So I just tried my best to like bear that amount of pain. I was in a very dark place. So that was 8 weeks of just brutal pain, but I was like holding on to hope because I was like, okay, in 80% of people, it shrinks the tumor. But every week he would be like, nope, it's the same size. So that became deflating. And then at the end of the radiation, he said, radiation takes time. Sometimes it kicks in after, like 3 months after. So we're going to get an MRI in 3 months from now. And I was like, okay, it has to show shrinkage because like, there's no way I could have gone through all this pain without some sort of guarantee of shrinkage. And the 3 months came and went. And so I got another MRI and I was 100% expecting to finally see shrinkage. And I had like 8, maybe 9 MRIs prior to that. And it's like every MRI, it was like bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I was just desperate to see some sort of like turning around point. And then I got the MRI and it showed the tumor was bigger. I remember seeing the 14 centimeters because, when it was discovered, it was like 5 centimeters. And then it was like, oh my God, 8 centimeters. And then it was like 9, 10, 11, that's just the first plane, but it was like 14 by 12 by 10 centimeters, which, I stopped visualizing what kind of fruit that is. Like, I didn't even want to know. I didn't want to conceptualize it, but I just knew like, how can I have gone through all of that, be in this much pain, and it's still growing? Like, I just lost it. I was so upset. I lost all hope at that point. I was just like, I was convinced I was going to die. On top of that, they found another spot in the middle of my spine, and they said that it was like infiltrating the bone marrow. So then it's just like, it just really started to look like hopeless for me. So that was a very hard, dark time. And I just remember that being like my lowest point of this whole cancer journey, honestly.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Also, I think we've all known the feeling of every door being shut in your face. I think that's the quality of these initiations. Looking back, when every door is being shut in your face, you can now take it. If you're listening today and you feel like, oh my God, that's totally my life right now, please take it from both Crystal and I that that is an initiation, and every door is being shut because you're being shown the way. And you will hear it in Crystal's story soon, that even at this really hopeless, dark, anxiety ridden, fearful time where she must have experienced everything that has to do with survival, she found a straw to cling to. She found hope. And Crystal, let's get to it. How did that happen? What is that story?
Yeah, I think it was a couple days later. I was just racking my brain, like, what else? What else can I do? You know, because I think what happened at that point was I was like, okay, I'm just going to have to get the surgery. But when I went back to the surgeon, he said my skin is too damaged to have the surgery at that point. So he said I would need to wait 3 more months.
Because of the proton beam.
Yeah, because if you operate on the skin, it's not going to heal. And then you can have all kinds of complications. So he wanted to wait 3 more months for the skin to heal so he would have better outcomes with the surgery. And so then it's like still a lot of fear. So I'm racking my head with like, what can I do? I have these 3 months. Like, what can I do? And I just remember seeing that book, Becoming Supernatural. It was just like kind of in a pile of other books that other people had sent me. I don't know, like it just felt like it was calling to me. And I think I remember other times somebody had mentioned Joe Dispenza, and I was like, okay, let me check this guy out, see what he's all about. And so I just started reading his book. And that's like, just like the first chapter, like I just started having this hope again. And because he's talking about meditation, and he's talking about how this woman who had this like really brutal life story, just like everything that could be going wrong in your life, and how she came back from that.
It's in the first few chapters.
Yeah. It wasn't even a story about cancer, but it just like gave me all this hope. That's where it kind of started. And then that's when I thought again about the man I'd met on the beach. And I was like, okay, I get it. Like, I get the meditation part. I get that. Okay. So then I started doing his meditations. And I just remember within 1 week, I felt such a powerful shift from like all the fear and anxiety to just one of like surrender and like everything's going to be okay. And I was like so peaceful.
Wow.
Yeah, it was such a dramatic shift.
That's huge. Like that's a huge breakthrough given the amount of pain that you were in, the medications you were on, and how many doors were shut in your face. Within a week to be able to experience that, I feel like I have goosebumps. But tell us a little bit about, do you remember what were your first few meditations like? Like, I know when we first start, we're just skeptical. I don't know. And then what was yours?
I was in it with open-minded, like curiosity. Let's give this a try, you know, like, what do I have to lose? I mean, I was literally like backed against a corner. I had nothing else I could do. And so I don't even know that I thought it was going to heal the tumor, but I just loved the mindset shift it was giving me. And I remember like, it was like his earlier meditations where it's all about like just perceiving the space around you.
Yeah.
So just a lot of that, like just a lot of like, oh, that's weird. I've never done that before. Like I've never tried to perceive space around my body, you know?
Yeah.
So that was different and it was new. And I was like, why not? Let's try it. I think those were even just doing those, it wasn't like a big visualization or anything initially. I think I did the blessing of the energy centers, you know, but it just felt good. And even if I was in pain, I was in this state of acceptance, which made the pain more tolerable.
Beautiful.
I would do them laying down, you know, because I couldn't sit.
And so a week in, you notice a major shift in your pain, which must have been really hopeful and cautiously optimistic way of like, okay, maybe there is something there. So you had a little something and you took it and went with it. And I love that you shared that it was those initial meditations where he teaches you to just get in touch with the void, like, you know, letting go of your 3D self and putting your attention instead on space. And it can sometimes feel like, oh, I don't want to do that meditation because it's for kids, but it's like so effective. I really think it's the foundation of his work, and it really brings you you to a lot of peace. When I was first learning meditation, I remember that space gave me just so much peace because I was in a very depressed state, but it brought me peace, and so much that it sort of became my addiction to, if I want to feel peace, let's just go there. And I thought that that was life-saving for me. So if anyone is listening and is wondering what advanced meditation they should do, I think you should really listen to Crystal saying that she did some of the basic meditations, and that itself, doing those and doing them with acceptance, which I think is powerful, can bring you really, really incredible results. So you're meditating, you're in pain, the pain is reducing, you are in bed, you're surrounded by family and friends, and I'm sure they are deeply worried for you. And meditation is not like something that is prescribed as a healing thing. So what was their reaction, and how did it affect your resolve to now use this tool to heal?
I don't know if I remember telling everybody like, oh, I'm doing this meditation thing. I think I just quietly did it, when I was in my room and it was like the morning time. And I know like nobody was going to bother me at that time. My mom, she might see me with my headphones on or something and then just come back another time. I don't remember. But yeah, I was doing the meditations, and it wasn't right away that I felt a reduction in pain. It was the first week that I really just felt like the mental shift. And then I would say more like 6 or 7 weeks later, I started to notice a decrease in pain. But like at the same time, I had started taking cannabis oil. And so I didn't know, I actually attributed it more to that because I was like, oh, it's probably the cannabis oil. And it could have been both or whatever. But I was just like thinking of it, meditation more and more as like helping me with like my mental shift. And if it does more for me, that's great. But I honestly was just like in this state of surrender. And I wasn't really thinking about like, is this going to work? Is this going to work? Or anything like that. So I just kept meditating for the 3 months. And then it was time for me to go get an MRI. And by the end of that 3 months, I was able to sit for my meditations. So that kind of demonstrates like a dramatic shift in my pain levels. Yeah. And I was able to stand up longer, like to take a shower. Yeah. I was able to walk, I could walk with a walker or, walk here and there, but I think that was also extended as well in what I could do. So I was very hopeful. I don't even know if I was expecting anything. It's weird, that state I was in. It was like I had zero expectations, but I was just loving the meditations at the same time. So I went to get my MRI, and when I got the results the next day, so this is 3 months after I had gone to see the surgeon, and he's like, I have to wait 3 months, but it was basically 1 year since my diagnosis. So everything I was talking about, it's been 1 year that I tried Brazil, I tried immunotherapy, I tried the naturopathic doctor, I got the radiation, and then I'm waiting to get the surgery. But like I had these 3 months of meditation. And so I go to get the MRI, and the tumor had shrunk by 30%. And it was the first time I'd ever seen that the tumor had shrunk, in that whole year. It was always just getting bigger, bigger, bigger. And so it was so amazing for me to see finally. I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And the other crazy thing is like, that was the first MRI that I went to where I didn't have anxiety. I was just so like, it felt like I was going to get a haircut or just like a regular doctor's appointment or the dentist or something. Like there just wasn't any anxiety for me going into that appointment. So I always thought that was interesting too. I was just such in a state of calm, peacefulness, surrender. So that was really good news. And then at the same time, or the same morning that I got that really good news about the tumor shrinking, like 2 hours later, I got a message that I was awarded a scholarship to go to the Joe Dispenza retreat 3 months away in Portland, Oregon. And so I got those 2 pieces of amazing news on the same morning. And so I didn't even put them together initially. I just thought it was like, oh my God, what an amazing day that I had these 2 pieces of really good news. And then like, I think that night I went to bed and I woke up at 3 a.m. and it was just like one of those things where it felt like somebody just threw cold water on my face, but in a spiritual way or something, to like, wake up. This is a synchronicity. Like this is a connection. Because I remember briefly Dr. Joe Dispenza talking about synchronicity, and that's kind of how you know your meditations are working. And it's like, yeah, of course. these two pieces of good news were connected. And it's telling me, the universe is trying to send me a message that your meditations are working. The meditation has to do with the tumor shrinking. So that's how I interpreted it. And so I kept going with the meditations. And then 3 months later, I went to that retreat in Portland, Oregon. That was July 2019.
Yeah, so you had been meditating before you actually went to a retreat for quite a while, right? Like 7, 8 months.
Yeah.
You were working on yourself. You had read the book, Becoming Supernatural. You were obviously making mental shifts and emotional shifts. Could you speak to that a little bit? Was there a change in the thoughts that would usually loop around in your brain when you were, giving into the fear and the anxiety given your very intense situation versus now this person that meditates? Was there a clear shift in how you were choosing to be?
100%. So I read all his books, right? So Changing the Habit of Being Yourself and his other two books. And I was inspired by what he said about elevated emotions. So I really tried to carry these elevated emotions throughout my day, not just in the meditation. And it's funny, like, because I have this right here that I'll show you. I made this during that time when I was just getting into the Joe Dispenza. It's just like a little canvas, and I painted it. And it's like the word love, joy, grateful, inspired, peace. And I just still have this to remind myself to try to carry these elevated emotions like throughout my day. And so I just had that little poster that I was just trying to look at every day, and I'd be reminded of it. And so, and then I also tried to carry forward this sense of already having it, already embodying somebody who's healed, just already having that sense of relief. And I just started looking toward things in the future. Like I started looking at going back to work and like, who am I going to email? And I started looking at apartments, like I'm going to move out of my mom's house. Like, where am I going to live? So I was kind of like taking steps forward into that future life, even though I wasn't prepared quite yet to go back to work. I think I did go back to work like right after the Joe Dispenza retreat, like part-time, because once I was able to drive, then I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get back into my life as soon as possible. Like I was taking these huge steps, maybe before I was like ready for it, because I was still in pain and still had to be on a certain amount of opioids, even though I had started reducing those as well. But yeah, things were looking good, and I was just trying to stay oriented into like my future self.
So yeah, that part is super important, because you can meditate all you want, but if with your eyes wide open, you're not able to really bring it to your 3D self and really affect your behavior, really stop those emotional loops that we get into, which just bring us down these spirals, and instead catch yourself and decide to have that one foot in the future. Like you said, you were already thinking about like, what will it be when I go to work and who am I emailing? I think Dr. Joe speaks about it beautifully too, that you're training your brain, right? You're breaking that habit that has formed because you were in such an intense experience of past 1 year where your brain is like hooked into survival because it knows you're unsafe. And now you have to untrain it to be like, no, we're safe. We're going to feel joy. We're going to feel hope and optimism. And it's a back and forth journey. So I love that you spoke about that, because then you went to the retreat and you had a powerful retreat experience. But it wasn't just the retreat itself that did something. Yes, it was the power of the collective also helping you heal. And you shared in your testimonial about being a healer for someone else and also receiving a healing, but how profoundly it helped you to actually give, even though I think, Crystal, if this was the 3D world with no Dr. Joe Dispenza, I think people who are dealing with such intense circumstances would probably feel that they're in a great deficit and have nothing to give. And what I find incredible about this work is here you are, you're fighting this beast for last year or so, you are fighting many internal battles every day. I'm sure there were many meditations where you didn't want to meditate because the pain was much, or something in the outside world said, well, that previous 30% was just a fluke and it's not going to work. There are so many stories that our mind makes up. Yet you were going and dealing with all of that, and you were able to actually receive a healing. Beautiful. But you were also able to give a healing to someone you don't know and may never meet. And I want you to speak a little bit about that heart opening experience you had, because a lot of people feel like they don't know what that feels like. Are you able to distinguish that? Like you said, when I actually gave a healing, my heart really opened. I want you to talk about that and what you think is the aftermath of having such an experience. Does it really translate into your biology and your mental health?
Yeah, so I imagine most of your listeners are familiar with Joe Dispenza, but during his retreats, they have Healees, where you have the opportunity to receive healing from others in a circle. And then you also have an opportunity, or I think most people are by default, if they're not a Healee, they're going to be a healer in the circle. So I had all this expectation. I was told that I was going to be a Healee on one day, and then the other 2 days I would be a healer. And I was very honored to have been chosen to be a Healee. And there was just a lot of talk about how amazing it is to be a Healee and how profound the healings are. And I just had so much expectation, and I was kind of scared. I was I don't know what's going to happen, because he shows you these videos about these crazy experiences and healings. And so I'm just going into it with, wow, kind of a little bit of fear, but also just a little bit of a bit too much expectation. I was just kind of on edge. So when I had that experience of laying down in the circle, I definitely felt subtle energy coming from the group members, but I felt like everybody else around me was having such a powerful experience. Maybe they were shaking or screaming, and they were getting rid of something, or just something profound was happening. And I was just quiet, and I just was like, is something wrong with me? I don't know why nothing's happening to me. And so then I got in that state where I was just like, what's wrong with me? Why is nothing happening to me? And so then I felt a little bit like maybe there was something wrong with me. That's kind of weird. But the whole experience was beautiful, and it was just subtle. And it was I had too much expectation or something. The next day I was the healer, and I had no expectations of having a profound experience. I was just I'm showing up to give myself to somebody else. And so in that first experience as a healer, I felt the energy so much more. And the first thing that I noticed or felt, I felt like there was a spiritual entity behind me, and that it was putting its energy through my heart, or, through my heart. And then that was coming through my hands. It's here, channel this energy. So it was giving me this healing energy, and it was flowing through me. And I just felt really powerful in that moment, and my heart opened, and it was tears were coming down my face. And I just felt so much gratitude. And also my hands were really hot. The palms of my hand were very hot, almost so hot that I wanted to put them down. But I just kind of knew I need to keep my hands here, because this healing energy is flowing through me. And so that was a really powerful experience. And I just felt so much love, so much love. The next day, it was the same thing, the same kind of experience. Felt this spiritual entity behind me, and just love, and all the energy was coming through me. And it was another beautiful experience.
And what do you make of it now? Did you think that this moment was pivotal in your healing journey? Because we know that you are cancer-free now. You have been for the past 7 or more years.
Yeah, I was diagnosed 8 years ago. So yeah, 7 years ago is when everything started turning around and going in the right direction.
And you have sort of checked off all your boxes of all the things that were said that would be part of the aftermath of the surgery. You're not limited, you can surf, you have been cancer-free for the last 7 years. And from what I gather, it has been a slow process. Slow in terms of fast if you look at it, it just happened. And here you are completely clear, given the challenge that you had to overcome. But if we really zoom in, I think it is a path that where you figured out, oh, this is my challenge. I'm here to overcome it. I can overcome it. You're taking the breadcrumbs from the divine of this guy showing up on the beach, the inner knowing saying, Crystal, this is not for you. The surgery is not for you. We're not going to go that way. We're going to go this way. The book showing up amidst a lot of books, it calling to you and you hearing that call. And then just, despite the external evidence, despite not having any external evidence of shrinkage, you just going for it and trusting that inner guidance system. It is really a beautiful story of you coming to meet the divine in you and that leading to emotional, physical, mental well-being to today where you are in a completely different phase of your life. And please tell us more about how has life evolved after this experience? What are you up to right now? And yeah, tell us all the good stuff. More good stuff.
Of course. So after I came back from that retreat, I had an MRI a few weeks later and it showed that the tumor had shrunk even more. So that retreat, I don't know if it was like during Healee, healer. I can say I definitely had a more powerful experience as a healer, but there was some major shrinkage. So by this time it was like, okay, I am not having this surgery because I found something that works. And so I just kept meditating over the next 2 years or so until I received that classification of no evidence of disease. And that was in 2021. So in those 2 years, I was like meditating every morning. I went back to work. I started surfing again. And everything was like little by little because, I had been bedridden and a lot of my muscles had atrophied. I was very, very weak. I had to like go back to the gym, rebuild my muscles. Like I could barely walk upstairs. I could barely get out of a car. Even when I could drive, it was just like I felt like a 90-year-old woman. So physically, I wish I could show you what I looked like. I didn't take pictures very much during that time or video or anything, but like I felt like a 90-year-old woman, walked like a 90-year-old woman. I walked with a walker for like, I don't know, 3 to 6 months, even after I started seeing shrinkage. And then I was limping. And then one day I wasn't limping anymore. And at some point during the radiation, I had to start something called self-catheterization, where you can't urinate normally. You have to stick like a plastic tube up your urethra in order to go to the bathroom. And so that was really hard and debilitating and like kept me kind of very close to the bathroom and like afraid to go anywhere. And then I was able to go to the bathroom normally, like during those years of like recovery. And it was just like every month, like I was just having another milestone and just like progressing and then just like never looking back, just it was really encouraging. And it's definitely what kept me going with the meditations. And the best thing was just getting off all my pain medications and not being in any pain whatsoever is like
Amazing.
Such a blessing, because that was like the worst part, was being in as much pain as I was in. So yeah, it's been an amazing experience and I'm so lucky, and I'm still doing the meditations, but I do them with different intentions, right? Because I'm like, okay, I'm already like physically healed. So now like, what do I want to call in, and what do I want to focus on for my future self? So it's been a lot of fun and really exciting journey.
Wow. I mean, I know that from meditations I've learned through Dr. Joe that, your body makes its own opioids and you can just make them with thought alone. You just have to get deep enough, train your brain enough. And you were probably doing that all along your healing journey, which is probably why your pain also reduced. But also something that stood out to me is the contrast between the person that you were that was trying all these different modalities because you wanted to survive. You really wanted to live. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it sounded like there was an element of control and desperation and frustration and fear and anxiety. And it's almost like you were just being your human self there. And then comes this book that literally is titled Becoming Supernatural, which I recommend to anybody who is dealing with a health condition or not, because it really talks about the part of you that is divine, that is unknowable, that is unlimited. I feel like I see that contrast of the person that you became when you surrendered to your meditations, when you really started, just despite the evidence on the outside saying this may not work out, you in some way just gave up on that part that was really wanting to control the situation and more just surrendered to, like, you know how you said beautifully, I was cautiously optimistic, kind of like, okay, let's try it. And it led you straight to the door of the divine. But it's not a door that exists outside or leads to something outside of you. I think it's a door that leads straight within. And you were following the path of intuition. You were following the breadcrumbs from the inside. But I think what's worthy of mentioning is, to me, it sounds like you became really both your human and divine self by walking this path. And so today, before we started, Crystal and I were sharing some of the really fun things that are just being magnetized, because she's become this magnetic person who has had an amazing healing journey. And now synchronicities and opportunities are coming to her. And I would love, Crystal, for you to share some of this amazing stuff that has been happening and how it has been happening.
Yeah, so a lot of those things have been happening for me this year. So in June, I went to the Cancun Joe Dispenza retreat, and I was not planning on getting on stage, sharing my story. I think my intention was just to maybe find the cameraman and have him do a testimonial for YouTube. That's what I was thinking. And so I did do that, but then they reached out to me and they said, Joe Dispenza wants to meet you backstage. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so that happened. And then he was like, we got to get you on stage to share your story. And so like, it was just like a bunch of serendipitous events, or synchronistic, that I was not expecting. And that, you know, sharing my story on stage was an amazing experience. Definitely a highlight of my year. And then 2 weeks ago, I get a phone call from Dr. Joe's team, a voicemail saying, Dr. Joe was just thinking about you because we're in San Diego at the 7-day retreat and we would like you to come be a guest at the retreat. And they're like, we're on day 3, but come down whenever. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I had to finish up some work. And then I went down to the retreat and they got me a hotel, parking pass. I didn't know what was going on. Like, did they want me to speak or something? Or did he legit just think of me because I'm in San Diego? Because I think that's how I start my YouTube speech, or my speech that I did on stage. I was like, my name is Crystal and I'm from San Diego. And so it was really funny when I went down there, a lot of people recognized me from my video. So I kind of felt like a little bit like celebrity, which I wasn't expecting. It was kind of funny. And then on the last day, you know, so I'm just doing all the meditations and, you know, like any other participant. But the last day, I'm sitting in the front row, center stage, and Dr. Joe Dispenza comes out on stage. And so I'm not very far from him. So I just kind of wave hello at him. And then he waves back and he kind of beckons me to come to the stage and gives me a hug. And I said, thank you so much for allowing me to be a guest. And he said, yeah, no problem. Are you coming to the dinner tonight? And I said, dinner? I haven't heard anything about a dinner. And then he said, I'll make sure you get the information. I'm like, great, I would love to come. So they told me the place of the dinner. It was at the steakhouse at the hotel. It was the last day of the retreat. So I guess him and his team, they always have a dinner. And I was kind of nervous going in because I was thinking, like, I'm not going to know anybody. It's probably going to be awkward. That could not be further from the truth. As soon as I'm walking in, it's like these 5 round tables with 10 people sitting around each table. So like 50 people in a big private room at the back of the restaurant. And like Kelly jumps up and then his main AV guy like jump up. They're like, oh, she's here. And like they grab my hand and they take me to my seat. And I'm sitting like 2 seats down from Dr. Joe. So it's just like me, this other woman from the inner science research, and then Dr. Joe. So I get to talk with him, you know, for like a good portion of the dinner. And that was just amazing. And then he tells me, or his main I don't know, like AV guy, I got to remember his name, but he said, we're going to do the docu-series and we want you to be part of this docu-series. And so I said, yes, count me in. So just like, that's just like another surprising thing that I was not expecting to happen, just like magically happen. And so because of those things, I feel like I have more trust in the universe now than ever before. Like, I am just like, thank you. This has been amazing. Like, yes, sign me up. I don't know. Like, I don't feel like I have to push for anything to happen. And it's just been amazing. And I also got like a book deal, and that kind of happened where like that came to me in a meditation, the publishing company that I was going to reach out to. And so it's just been magical. I have a book coming out in 2027 about my story. So I'm really excited for that too.
Wow. I'm just so happy for you and so excited for, I always love to hear these synchronicity stories because they always remind me that you don't have to push so hard. You don't have to try to make things happen. Like, you tried nothing. It happened to you, and it's not a passive way of looking at things as like, I'm not going to take action. No, I think it's actually quite the opposite. You go and take the action that you need to take in life. And when something is a perfect fit, perfect match with your energy and frequency, it just drops down and has your complete attention.
Yeah, and I think the action that I was taking behind the scenes was writing my book. Because I had written my whole book and was pretty much finished. That's when I got asked to speak on stage. And because I had written the book, I think that's why I was able to speak about my story in a clear way. Because I'm like, I know all the plot points because I just spent the last like 3 years writing about them. And so I didn't know like what, I still don't know what's going to happen with this book, but I just feel like it's part of my purpose to share my story. And I feel like the universe is backing me in that purpose. And that's why all of these things are happening, you know? So I think part of it is just like allowing the universe to show you the guidance, but then also taking those steps behind the scenes. Because I feel like I've been also guided that I should write this book. It's been a great experience. You know, I know a lot of people don't like writing, but I've loved it. I've been loving every minute of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I am one of those people that you were just talking about. So this has given me some inspiration to actually just follow that inner knock knock of like, yo, you need to go and do this. And I'm like, no, come tomorrow. I often do that. I eventually listen, but many times I just let it go. But I think it's important to reiterate. It is like Dr. Joe says, it is a razor's edge of surrender and intention. And I think sometimes some of the questions that I get on the podcast also to be answered are like, how do you know? When? How do you know? And so I would love to ask you, because we're just on this topic where you made a very important point of you can surrender the rest, but take the action that you need to take, right? So you had to write the book and do that, all of that in 3D. And then the rest is kind of like synchronicity. It comes to you when you're an energetic match. Do you have any other insights to share or any other experience about how do you balance, how do you understand surrender versus intention now that you look back on your whole journey? Is there some insight into it?
Yeah, I think it's not always easy to surrender. If you're like me, you have that kind of drive to control and like push everything to happen. But I think for me, everything that's happened, I've not expected it to happen the way it's happened because I feel like that's like a form of control. Even in my visualizations, I'm like, okay, I want this to happen. And then I'm telling the universe like how I want it to happen. And like, you know, doing that whole like visualization thing. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with doing that in the visualization, but I feel like every step of the way I've been so surprised. And so I just think like making room for that surprise, it's almost like I feel like the universe wants to say, okay, you can have what you want, but it's more fun for us to give it to you in a way that you don't expect. So I see it that way, that it's like, I have this intention of what I would want to happen. It just ends up happening a different way. So that's part of the like letting go part. Like you have this intention and, you know, you can have these elevated emotions, which is great. You know, I think that will connect you with that. And then you just like let it go and just wait for the surprise to show up, I guess, or don't even wait. But like, I feel like I love being surprised. And I just love this year how like the universe has been surprising me like so much. And I feel like I'm tuned into the radio station that's like surprise and delight. And so I'm trying to ask myself, like, what am I tuned into? Like, what am I tuned into? Am I tuned into the emotions of like survival and control and like wanting to like push everything? And why is it not happening for me? That is not the emotion that you want to have when you're trying to get something that, or, you know, you're trying to fulfill this intention, right? So I've talked to a lot of people since I've given my speech, just like on the phone, or people reach out. And a lot of times I get that energy of like, why isn't it happening yet? I've been doing the meditations, and they're just like holding on to this. And I kind of just feel like it's either going to happen as soon as they like let go completely and surrender, or it's going to like healing is going to happen in like a different way. Like maybe you're wanting like the physical healing, but like maybe it needs to come in layers where like first you have to heal emotionally or spiritually or just in some other way. I think there's always this element of like the universe wanting to surprise us. And for me, it's been a big theme of like, when I expect something, it's not going to happen, because that expectation, it's like I'm holding too tightly to it. So it's not always easy, but I love that, like the razor's edge of, what did you say?
Intention and surrender.
And surrender. Yeah, I would say it's a razor's edge. So it's not always easy to find, but it takes practice for sure.
Yeah, I love it. My favorite thing that you said was the making room for surprise. It is such a good line. Like, you can have your intention, visualize, believe it, become it, and then make room for surprise, because it's not going to happen the way you think it's going to happen, because then it's coming from the known. It's not the unknown, and it's not the field. So it's kind of funny that our brain is so tuned in to finding the known that it's like, no, but it's going to happen like this. And it puts us in this energy of desperation and frustration and control. And the only thing to do is maybe laugh at yourself like, oh my God, the control freak is out again. I'm going to let it go. And this is what I want. And I'm going to believe it, behave it, become it. But I'm going to let go of the how and the when. The when is also extremely important sometimes, especially for me. I can get very like, but this was my agenda, universe. Like, why are you not showing up? It's like, make room for surprise. I love it.
It's like if somebody's trying to plan you a surprise party and you're trying to figure everything out, and it's going to be like this. It's no fun for the person trying to surprise you, right?
Yes. Imagine you being the guest of honor at that surprise party and you timing your own surprise. Be like, no, if I come at this point, it's going to be a bigger surprise. Like, what?
Yeah, it's no fun.
Yeah, amazing. So I know that we have a lot of good stuff that is coming from you into the world soon. And for anyone listening who wants to connect with you, who has, I don't know, 50 questions that they want to ask you or know more about your journey, because I know it is, you're probably unraveling the spiral right now of all the things that happened, and you're going to share them on a wonderful YouTube channel soon. So tell us more about all your offerings and where can people find you?
So first of all, you know, I mentioned like, it felt like it was kind of, I was being guided to kind of write this book. And so lately I've felt more, because I finished the book, I've been feeling more guided to start a YouTube channel, which I've just started. I'm going to be putting my first video up this week. So I think maybe by the time it airs, there will be videos. So my YouTube channel is Mind Body Healing 444. I also have an Instagram account, which might be good for people to reach out with messages. It's crystal.mindbody. And if you search my name, you can also find me on Facebook. And I also have a website called cancerfree.com. And I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Cancerfreeforlife.com. You'd think I know the name of my website. Cancerfreeforlife.com. And I have a freebie there if anybody wants to download. It's called The Ultimate Guide Mind Body Tools to Healing. So they just have to enter their email and they can get that. And it talks a lot about like just the different things I used besides the Joe Dispenza meditation, talk more about like the visualization, about how like I was just like acting as if. I talked a little about that, like just like stepping back into like my future self or stepping into my future self. And then also like, we didn't talk about it, but it was super important to me to like feed my belief that it's possible to heal. So I was constantly listening to the Joe Dispenza testimonials and just like feeding my mind with the healing stories so that I was like wiring my brain with the belief that it's possible, and also just doing the emotional work and gratitude as well. So I talk kind of more in depth about those things too.
Amazing. And we are going to link all of these links in our show notes so you can easily click on them and find Crystal and ask, and you shall receive. Amazing. Well, we're almost at time. I feel like there could be another 20 questions that we could just go in and talk about. And maybe once your book is out, we're going to have a lot more to talk about. But congratulations on birthing this book. What a beautiful contribution. And I'm sure it's going to be such a guide for people who are finding themselves in your footsteps and able to overcome whatever life is throwing at them. But thank you so much for sharing so deeply, beautifully, in such an articulated way, your entire story. It helps that you have written the book, so you're so clear in your clarity of everything that happened, and everything you overcame just shines through. And I'm so delighted to see you looking so well and happy and radiant and just creating magic in your life even now. The testimonial was a peak point, a good point, but now I see other peaks happening, which to me is evidence that once you get to know the human and the divine in you and you get in touch with that, life becomes a colorful path. And I feel like, Crystal, your life is definitely a beautiful, colorful path. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for the beautiful words. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share.
If this episode resonated, share it, and be the reason someone chooses growth today. You can watch the video episodes on YouTube or audio episodes anywhere you get your podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave me a colorful comment. If you have follow-up questions or topics you would like me to explore, please visit me on divineamuleto.com. Link is in the show notes. As always, thank you for being here with me. Until next time, keep choosing your colorful path.